All right, what is up, folks? Welcome back to another episode of Make Fitness Make Sense. Per the usual, I'm your host, Coach JK McLeod, and we are kicking off episode number 10. This is going to be a comment and response episode. Maybe you've heard it referred to before as a Q&A, but I try to keep it mostly real with you here, and not all of these are questions that have specifically been posed to me. Sometimes they are going to be based on comments or posts that I see on the internet and things that I've maybe replied to. And I take this opportunity to be able to provide some additional context behind some of the comments that I will make in response to these posts. So they're all underneath the overall, let's just try and help you make sense of this fitness thing umbrella. We are going to talk about some hopefully helpful tips with getting a better understanding of why somebody might be experiencing some bloating issues and maybe stuck at a weight plateau. We are going to also talk about overcoming the fear of failure that is stopping someone from starting. Also going to share some recommendations that I made for a few books that someone could potentially find helpful on a really focused period of time that they are going to go hard in the paint as far as the gym and also with their finances. And before getting into that, though, as always, I want to say thank you for choosing to press play on the Make Fitness Make Sense podcast. I know that you have plenty of other podcast content that you probably consume, especially fitness related. So I promise you that I do not ever take it for granted that you chose to press play on Make Fitness Make Sense. Before we get started on the specific topics that I brought up, I have two things that I want to share with you. One, at the time that this is being recorded and released, which is going to be Tuesday, August 18th, there is also another podcast that I want to strongly, and I am so biased about this, strongly recommend that you go listen to. And it's because I was given the opportunity to be a guest on Coach Betsy Foster's podcast, which is called Your Strongest Body. I will put a link to that in the show notes. I'll do the link to the Apple Podcast version of that particular episode because according to what the data tells me, most of you all listen to my podcast on Apple Podcasts. If you're listening on Spotify, shout out because you're also my people too. I mean, that I just find Spotify to be, I'm going to be straight up with you, an infinitely better just interface to work with when it comes to podcasting. And also, I'm not going to bite the hand that feeds me when it comes to podcast listeners. So I'm going to put the link to Your Strongest Body podcast hosted by Coach Betsy Foster. We recently had a conversation and that episode is out today. So please give that one a listen. And if you find that episode to be impactful, helpful, useful, or anything in any way, please share that with a friend, coworker, family member, even people that you don't like. Just so that we can get some more listens there so that you can get that actual helpful information. It was a fantastic conversation. Betsy is hands down one of my favorite people within the fitness industry. I find her to be extremely genuine, extremely knowledgeable, like very, very knowledgeable. I actually learned quite a bit just from following her content. So please go check that out. Again, that's going to be on a podcast called Your Strongest Body. All right. So the other thing that I said that I wanted to cover before getting into the specific topics was actually to share a tip that, I don't even know if it's a tip, some insight that came from a recent client call. So to give you a little bit of context, I was recently having a call with a client and they just started a new training block. I believe that at the time that we had our call, they were finishing up the intro week for their new training program. So in an intro week, that is basically just week one of a new training program. That will be a week where I give my clients the autonomy to, and they always have the autonomy to really auto-regulate, which basically just is a fancy term for just adjust the amount of intensity that they're using for the workouts. They always have that particular autonomy. I just ask that they at least leave a note to let me know what was going on. If they tend to, let's say we were really looking to make this like a 8 out of a 10 as far as the effort and intensity level, and they ended up feeling like it was more of a 4 out of 10, I just ask that there's some sort of information as to why they made that particular adjustment, just like kind of know. Because if we start to see that being a pattern, then we can get to the foundation of what's going on there. Anyways, so with an intro week, I will generally have folks leave more reps in the tank than usual, especially on their main lifts, because they typically are just getting used to possibly a newer layout, a few newer moves here or there. I mean, when I write a new training block for a client, I typically don't do all new movements completely. This particular client has a 2 to 3 days per week total body split. Well, it's really a 3 days per week total body split. And we know that with the season that she is about to go into, she's in the education field. So with the season that she is about to go into, the 3 days a week that she was working out religiously over the summer, we really took advantage of that particular time. She also went into a cut. I want to say she lost about 12, 13 pounds during that particular cut, did it in a very sustainable way where as she's reversing, you'll still be in pretty good space there. We just know that as this season is transitioning to the nitty gritty of her school year, that different events and other things will pop up. So assuming that she'll always be able to get 3 workouts in per week is not realistic. So we will move to a system where even though the program itself is written as a 3-day split, so a total body A, B, and C, typically what it's going to be is probably workout on say like a Tuesday and then a Friday or Saturday. And then that third workout will typically push to the following week. But that's not really the main point. The main point is in that particular call, I asked her to share with me how she's felt like her energy levels have been as she's been executing the intro week of the program. And then even the previous week, she's had a decent amount of some travel and also has been working the entire time. So she's not in a position where from a education standpoint, she's in let's say administration for education. So she doesn't get her summers off. She's still active and whatnot. So there's still some work that's still happening even prior to the students coming back. And with asking her to share any feedback that she had about how her energy levels have been, how recovery has felt, now that we're finishing out the first week, that intro week of the new training block, she said something that at the time I just jotted it down, let her finish, sharing what her feedback was, and then we went back to it. And what she said was, yeah, I just don't know that this week is really a good gauge for how my energy levels are going to be with this new training block because I just had a lot going on. I had a lot on my plate this week just with getting different things done at work and also transitioning from the summer into the fall. Her overall vibe was, this week wasn't really all that stable. So I don't know if this is going to be the best gauge for what my energy levels would be like, or if this particular training block is the Goldilocks and 3 bears, if it's the right amount of volume and all that other stuff. So she continued to give me the feedback that I was looking for. And then I went back and we had a conversation around that statement where she was saying, I don't know that this week is really a good gauge for how, if we're at the right amount of volume, frequency, and intensity for this program. And I challenged her on that. And I said, actually, I'd say that after everything that you've described and how you felt and all that stuff, this week is a great gauge. It's a great indicator for whether or not, starting off wise, we feel like we've got a good solid handle on the amount of volume, frequency, and intensity we should have in this particular program. And I wanted to share that here just before going into these other topics, because I think that's something that is often missed when sitting down to really take a look at or evaluating, specifically looking at your training program. And this is a mindset that trickles not just into just training. It also trickles into nutrition and really just about anything that you're doing strategy wise, is this subconscious belief, or I guess most beliefs are subconscious, but I think you know what I'm getting at. Just this habit that we have of gauging whether or not a plan is effective or not effective. We're waiting for the ideal conditions to properly review the effectiveness of, in this case, the training program. So in this particular instance, it was a week where things, I mean, there was a structure to her work week, and also there were some things that potentially popped up that she didn't plan on. There's some structure to her personal life, and also there are potentially things that pop up that she doesn't plan on. And this is something that happens very, very commonly with most folks. And when I'm talking about things that pop up that you don't plan on, I'm not even talking about the commonly said things like your kids get sick, some massive emergency pops up. Like here in the Midwest, we over this past weekend had just terrible, like awful storms that came through. We had 20,000 people that were without power just in our local area. There's still folks that are trying to deal with flooding. It was also when the major university here was doing their move in. And so, for any folks that are out there who have been involved in the college move in process, imagine trying to move in, like literally moving in during a tornado warning and 60-mile-an-hour winds. And I promise you, I'm not exaggerating. We had power lines, like, or power poles literally snapped and shut a street down or a major road down for 3 days. So imagine doing all that stuff. So I'm not even talking extreme events like that coming up that you don't plan for. I'm talking about the stuff where a particular meeting runs late at work. I'm talking about last minute, or maybe not so last minute, but you maybe forgot about it. There's an email that pops up with this task that's needed. There's, some sort of plan follows through because somebody is unable to jump in and help where you thought they were going to be. You went to go fix a particular situation and it turned out to be worse than you thought. Just all these different things that potentially happen. So on weeks when you're sitting down to evaluate, hey, is this a good plan or a bad plan, or is there enough volume in here and the intensity, especially in this case where I'm talking to that person about their energy levels and getting an understanding of how sustainable this particular layout will be. Rarely do I want it to be based on if all the stars align and everything is absolutely perfect. I actually am very interested, and I believe that most coaches and trainers who write programming should be interested in how well is this designed to be executed on a challenging week, because writing a program that can be executed on your best week, or even a super, super solid good week when it comes to everything pretty much being planned and not a whole lot of things are out of whack, and not saying perfect, but just for the most part, like everything's going the way that you want it to, that's pretty easy to do. It's different when you make sure that a plan is built where often what you're calling plan B is likely going to end up being your plan A. So that, I definitely started that off way longer than I planned to. But that was, man, this is something that comes up very, very regularly, is just this thought process of like, well, that this week wasn't really a good gauge. So maybe this upcoming week, I'll have a better idea of whether or not this food plan really is going to be sustainable, or whether or not this training plan is going to be sustainable. Like if you keep pushing, as they call it, like kicking that can down the road, that's really what keeps us on this hamster wheel and the series of left turns all the time, is just that waiting for like a pretty good week in order to figure out whether or not something works. All right, let's get into these topics. So the first one, I'll just read the post. This post, by the way, has since been deleted by the person. I'm not sure why they deleted it. However, here's what they said. They said, I've been eating 1,400 calories for about 2.5 months and lost about 11 pounds. So I got down to 121 pounds. To lift my performance, I went up to 1,500 to 1,550 calories and my weight is consistently, I'm assuming, stuck at 126 pounds. So far, they went from 1,400 calories. They were there for about 2.5 months. They bumped that up to somewhere in the 15 to 1550 range. And they have noticed that their weight has gone up by 5 pounds. So after an 11-pound loss, they increased their calories, and they said their weight has gone up by 5 pounds and it's stuck. Now, they specifically are mentioning that they wanted to lift their performance, and that's why they increased the calories. Here's the part that I'm going to talk about. They said, I have a lot of bloating issues lately too, because I upped my protein and got extremely consistent with a minimum of 120 grams of protein every day. But is this 5-pound weight gain normal? Can I continue to lose weight eventually? I hope this is just a temporary hurdle. All right. So in this particular case, there's a handful of things that I mentioned, and I'm also going to provide some additional context here. What I pointed out to the person is that they mentioned that they increased their calories by an average of, let's say, about 100 calories on average. So they went from about 14 to somewhere around 15, maybe a little bit more, but let's say about 100 calories. And they also mentioned that the protein was the reason for bloating. So if you take 100 calories and you're specifically attributing a 100 calorie increase specifically to protein, protein is 4 calories per gram. So basically, that would be 25 grams of protein that the person increased on average each day. So if that's the case, then, and that's the only thing that's changed in going from 1,400 to 1,500 has been increasing protein to make sure that they're getting in the minimum of 120. My question that I had asked is if they were able to share what they've been eating and or drinking to get in that additional 25 grams of protein. Now, like I said, they've since deleted the post, so there's not really a whole lot else that I could really comment on as far as specifics in this particular situation. What I am going to share with you is a perspective where I don't want, my intention here is not for you to get super locked in on these exact numbers. It's more to try to maybe zoom out even more and picture a scenario where you may be this particular person where you're reporting these particular things. You're reporting, hey, I was at this many calories for about 2.5 months. I had bang up results. I mean, they lost 11 pounds, assuming that's what they were looking to do, and realized, hey, you know what? In order to really support the amount of performance that I want, and I've also been hearing about the importance of protein, I decided that I was going to increase my protein, and that brought my calories up about 100 to 150. It brought my calories up by about 100 to 150 calories per day. Now I'm experiencing bloating. So simply attributing the bloating to I increase my protein is, and if you've listened to me in this podcast, or maybe even in Help Me Understand, my other podcast on episodes where I'm specifically talking about fitness, there's just a lot. It's just very incomplete information. That is something that I will talk about very often. And I also, you've heard me say before, social media is not built for nuance or context. It is just not. So there's just a lot of incomplete information, because if we're assuming that the only thing that has changed between the previous calories and the new calories is increasing protein, then one of the first places that we start is exactly the question that I'm asking is, what were we eating? What are we eating and or drinking in order to get in that additional protein? I remember working with a coach before, and when I say working with, I mean doing some training for a coach before, and she was a nutrition coach, and we were talking about just some different things that she was seeing with her clients. And one of the things that she had mentioned is that she's noticed that for many of the clients that she coaches, when they're first trying to increase their protein, they immediately start looking for like the ready to drink stuff like Premier proteins, and the protein that's basically a shake already in the cup or the bottle or whatever it may be. And one of the things that she had noticed is that when people are drinking a lot of those, there are some people who tolerate them completely fine. I'm raising my hand if you're not watching this video, raising my hand, because I tolerate ready to drink stuff really, really easily. Like I don't really, that I'm aware of, experience any sort of bloating or digestive issues or anything like that. And also, that doesn't mean that just because one person does or doesn't experience something, that it's the same experience for another person. So that's always stayed in the back of my head, because that there's so much of a large focus on making sure that especially women are getting in an adequate amount of protein, that sometimes when you receive that messaging of you're not getting in enough, you immediately try to fill in those gaps with something different. Like you move straight to the supplements, like, oh, I need to get in 50 more grams per day. Cool, that's just a couple of these 20 to 30 gram ready to drink shakes. I down those. It takes maybe like, let's say you're not chugging it like a Jaeger bomb. I just dated myself Jaeger bombs, but let's say you're not chugging it like a shot, but you're sipping on it, whatever it might be. Those only take a few minutes to consume at best. And then you've got your 30 grams of protein in, and that has started to close the gap. That's one of the reasons that I don't recommend typically immediately starting with supplementation. Like when I have clients who are trying to really nail the eat well, and underneath the eat well is getting in an adequate amount of protein, I typically am recommending somewhere between zero point 0.4 to zero point 0.8 grams per pound of body weight. I typically don't recommend immediately moving to supplements. I ask them, what are you currently doing to get protein in it at each meal? Is there an opportunity within those particular servings to possibly increase those servings by some amount? Because even if you can squeeze out another 30 grams by increasing the amount of protein in your breakfast, lunch, and or dinner, that can close a decent amount of a gap for folks. I also don't recommend that if you're trying to get, let's just make up a number. If you're trying to get from, normally you're at 80 grams of protein and you've identified a target of trying to get to like 110, I don't immediately recommend immediately just closing the 30 gram gap. I recommend going somewhere around maybe about 10 grams per week or per 2 weeks, like slowly upticking, so that one, your digestive system can understand like what's about to happen, and two, you can try to still prioritize primarily whole food sources before going into like supplementation. So that's the thing, like supplementation, not substitute. So that's what I would throw out there. And then if this person were then to say like, yeah, I didn't, the only thing that I changed was I just had the same things that I was eating and drinking at 1400. And now with 100 and 150 to 150 more calories, I'm noticing the bloating and things like that. That's where then I would have some additional questions, because they also have the weight gain. I would also have some additional questions about what their training routine has looked like and what their sleep has been. I'd ask about those three things: eat well, sleep enough, exercise regularly. And then if it were something that were just out of my scope, where it's needing very specific attention to things like hormone profile, things like really prescribing like very specific macros and then monitoring that with them, that's out of the scope of what I do for my clients. So then I would refer them to somebody in my network. So just wanted to flesh that one out a bit there. All right, couple more. Let's see the next one. How do I overcome the fear that I'll fail on my health journey goals so I don't even want to begin? I've started and failed so many times. It's so hard to overcome the mental block to try again. And they said practical and kind advice would be so helpful. My answer on things like this is very straightforward, very simple. Instead of trying to overcome the fear that you're going to fail, let go of overcoming and start with embracing. Start with something, literally anything. Like start with anything and expect that you're going to suck at it. Like just expect to suck. Give yourself permission to be really, really bad at that thing. Then you'll meet the expectation. And then after that, after it's awful day one, then go back and do it again the next time. I don't even know if it's the next day, but day two, whenever day two is, go back and do that thing again. That may be contrary to what people believe is going to be helpful advice, and you are totally entitled to that opinion. So when somebody says like, "Hey, how do I overcome this particular fear?" My my best uneducated opinion here. No therapy, excuse me, no therapy certification or anything along those lines, in case you can't tell. My 100% opinion here is the best way to overcome a fear when it comes to this world, in the fitness world, which is typically related to I'm afraid to go to the gym. I'm afraid to start working out, lifting weights. I'm afraid to start doing cardio. I'm afraid to go to a class, whatever it might be. How do I overcome that fear? You don't overcome it. You take it with you. It's I'm not the first to use this analogy. It's like a backpack. Fear and the anxiety of the scenario of thinking like, man, what if I get into this class and I'm the only one who doesn't know how to do the movement and I'm going to feel stupid? Or what if I go to the gym and I get in there and I don't know like how to use the machines properly, or whatever the case may be. I have people flesh that scenario out. I'm like, yeah, okay, cool. What if that does happen? Then what are you going to do? What options do you have available to you? Those are the questions that I want to ask. Okay, so let's say you walk into the class and everybody looks like a pro and you're the only newbie. What do you do in that scenario? Like what options do you have is the better question. Well, I could leave. Well, no, let's take that option off the table. Let's say you're going to stay because you signed up for the class and you showed up. Let's say you stay. What option do you have? Well, I guess I could get there early and introduce myself to the instructor so they know that I'm new. Okay, cool. Let's go with that option. Whether you end up needing to use it or not, I am big on, like, instead of trying to overcome, which many times as I'm talking to somebody, the word overcome is being used when we're actually talking about avoiding. So how do I overcome this fear of looking stupid when I'm working out? You're actually saying, like, how do I avoid feeling uncomfortable and looking stupid in front of everybody when I go in the gym and I think that the leg extension machine is supposed to be used for bicep curls? How do I overcome that? You don't. You go do it anyway. And what if people laugh at me? Then they laugh at you. And then you still get to continue on your workout because that person is not like the judge and jury of whether or not you get to use that facility. So that is what I want to tell you. If you are someone who is asking yourself, how do you overcome the fear / how do you avoid the feeling of discomfort? And then you are finding that it is stopping you from even getting started, I want to give you permission to be really, really bad at something for a while. I'm not even saying when you first start, like when you start and when you're in the middle. Just assume that you are going to absolutely suck and not be good at the thing for quite some time. Then you're not missing expectations. You are doing exactly what we said you were going to do. And so far, for the most part, for the people who we've worked through things like this, like transitioning, especially transitioning from working out at home in the privacy of their basement or the garage or a corner. I remember I had a great client who'd work out like in the corner of like the baby's room, and then they were in the corner of a living room until they could build up their own stuff. And then eventually, let's say going to the gym, the majority of those times, it has never turned out to be the absolute failure that they thought it was going to be. None of them so far that I'm aware of that have talked to me ever like fell off the treadmill, ever had everybody in the gym stop and laugh, or any of the different scenarios that came up, even though we prepared for all of those things. Because I'm not the person who's going to tell you like, yeah, don't worry about it. Nobody's watching you. Nobody's looking at you. I'm going to say, well, what if they are watching you? What if they are looking at you? Assume that that's happening. Because if I tell you nobody's watching you and then you walk into the gym and you start doing some squats like on the Smith machine and then somebody looks at you, you're immediately going to be like, JK said that this wasn't going to happen and now it's happening. And then all of a sudden the just like total meltdown happens. So That's what I wanted to share on that. Don't try to overcome the fear, embrace it and move with it. And it's a backpack, heavy rocks. As you gain a bit of a comfort level in particular scenarios, that backpack becomes a bit lighter. I don't know that I'll promise you that it ever goes away. I do believe that it becomes lighter. And I can speak from personal experience. So there we go. All right. Last one to finish out. This will just be some quick recommendations for books. This person said, I have deleted Instagram indefinitely. Let's go. I'm on a 60-day run in the gym and a money run. Any book suggestions? All right. I had four books that I recommended, and then we are going to close this out because this episode's going a bit longer than I had. All right. So recommendations that I have, if you are going to make a 60-day run in the gym and get your money up, let's go. All right. So free recommendations I have for you. Number one, the book 12-Week Year. I specifically recommend that one because as you are on this run, you will need to put together some sort of true strategy to have during that time frame. Similar to the question that I just answered, don't wait to finish the book before starting the 60, 90, however many days run. I believe that the book, The 12-Week Year, is a fantastic read at any point. And especially, and there's a couple of recommendations that are related to this very concept, the concept that especially it is important to start working on your after 60 days plan during your 60 days. This relates very, very closely to advice that I give about folks who are wanting to do 75 hard. I'm like, as you are going through 75 hard, I want you to make sure that you have a plan for the 75 days after the 75. So as you're going through 75 hard, you're learning about different things about yourself and things like that. And then do you have a plan for day 76 and moving forward from there? So same thing, 12-Week Year. That's going to be a book that I would recommend so that you have a true strategy for yourself. Another book that I will recommend, two books specifically, would be How to Break Up with Your Phone and Atomic Habits. How to Break Up with Your Phone, I would recommend because they mentioned they were like deleting Instagram indefinitely. So there's probably, I'm going to guess there's some screen time, some phone stuff that's kind of going on there. How to Break Up with Your Phone. I believe that the author's name is Catherine Price. I've talked about this book a ton of times. It's basically broken into two halves. The first half of the book, and it's a quick read, it's not super, super long at all. The first half of the book is really about like stating the case for why there needs to be a change in the relationship with your phone, how it tries to keep you addicted, things like that. Then the second half is, I want to say it's like a 30-day cleanse or 28-day like challenge to like not use your phone or certain things on your phone. I still read it all the way through, even then, though I didn't plan on doing the full 28-day or 30-day cleanse, whatever is in there. I still read it all the way through. Fantastic book, How to Break Up with Your Phone. And I believe it's Catherine Price. I know Price is the last name. I'm also going to recommend Atomic Habits by James Clear. In my opinion, that is in the top 10 of best self-development books that's ever created. I believe it's right up there with 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, one of the best to ever do it. Recommend those specifically so that you can have, again, some sort of strategy for after that time period is over, so you're not just reverting to what the previous behaviors were. And then the last recommendation I have is a book called Outwitting the Devil by Napoleon Hill. I recommend that specific one because it is fantastic with helping you, the reader, understand distractions and temptations and how easily they absolutely will creep in. If you happen to be someone who is turned off by anything even closely related to God and or Christianity, then you will likely, that bias or that belief will likely bother you about this particular book because it does have an underlayer or undertone or a foundation of some biblical concepts to it. And it essentially, the whole like vibe of the book is someone having a conversation with the devil about how he distracts and tempts people. It is a self-development book. And also, I'll just keep it 100 with you. I'm somebody who is not bothered by things that are related to discussions around like God and Christianity. It's something that my faith is something that is important to me. in my life. So I'll just throw that out there. If you are someone who is really bothered by that and it's something that you're just like, I can't see past that, because if they mention anything about God, that really bothers me. I'm not here to judge you. I'm just giving you a heads up that that is something that's involved in this particular book. So if that colors like how your opinion of things, then skip the book. I think you'll be missing out on a valuable lesson, but I get where you're coming from. All right. So with that, that is the last one, and we are going to wrap up today's episode. Again, do me a favor, head over to Apple Podcasts or Spotify or whatever platform you're listening to this on. Check out the episode that I was most recently on with Coach Betsy Foster on Your Strongest Body. Thank you for listening. I really, really appreciate it. If you had comments, anything, ideas, whatnot, feedback about this particular episode or the podcast in general, hit me up. You can hit me up on Instagram at Coach JK McLeod. That's MCLEOD. You can also email me. Maybe you're like this person that posted the thing that they were going away from Instagram indefinitely. Good thing you can still email me, jk@jkmcleod.com. Also, last but certainly not least, if you would like to get a free, no strings attached workout to your email inbox every single week, all you need to do is sign up for my email list, and that will be delivered to you every Friday for free. All right, that link is going to be in the show notes. Again, thank you so much for listening. Really appreciate it. Take care of yourselves, and I'll talk to you next time. Bye now.